Hello, Internet. It's time for another Wednesday's Serial, that show that's like, hey, how you doing? Huh? You know. So first up, we got the real epic conclusion of Spider-Verse, and man, this was satisfying. I plan on talking about this whole event more at a future date. But the biggest thing about Spider-Verse and why this is a successful sort of event, if you will, is because this is a conclusion. Things end. It just, yes, thank you. That's beginning, middle, end. Doesn't seem like a lot to ask for from a story, but I got it, and I'm happy. And if more events were like that, I would be supremely more satisfied with them. And I mean, as far as like coming from a level of critique, that's just like, that is how you tell a story. Please, storytellers, do that. So, there you go. The second one was claimed to be tied to Spider-Verse, kind of. But Spider-Woman 4, this felt like the first issue of this comic in a way. In a way, it's kind of like a transition from the whole Spider-Verse thing to her own comic, so personally, I could have done with just having maybe like these first 4 issues be kind of the Spider-Woman Spider-Verse mini, then them launch into the new series, because that would have felt an effective use of that tool that they've used sometimes and not very well. So I don't know. This has a lot of Jessica Drew striking out on her own, going to do things. This is the last time we're going to see this horrid costume for a while, so that's a bonus in my mind. I know some other people aren't so big on that. The other thing is it looks like they might be changing the logo along with the costume, which I think is fair, probably about time. So I would be excited to see where this book is going, because this book was interesting to me, but when you're comparing it at the $4 range, one was this huge event that was everything and wrapped up and felt epic and just felt like I was sitting there reading for all. The other comic I breezed through and was interesting, but didn't hold up, and to say that these are worth a premium value, yes and no. So, yeah. Secret Six number 2 finally came out 3 months later, plus I think a couple weeks. Finally. And I'm really glad. I enjoyed this a lot more than the first issue, and this feels like Gail Simone is back in my mind. This is a good place for her to be dealing with some people that aren't necessarily on the straight and narrow, dealing with some people that aren't just solo female leads, basically. It lets her be a writer and not the female writer, which we've seen her do a lot, and she does a lot of that, and she does a great job of it. But having the pithy comments, having the straight up action, having some raw action is something that she's able to capture that no other writer in the business seems to be able to do in the same sort of way. And this is Gail Simone at her A game. This book is just going to get better. This is really quickly probably going to be the best thing DC's putting out, especially with Batman Robin coming off the table soon. So yeah, guys, pick this up if you're looking for another DC mainstream sort of book. This is the one to be looking at. Batman Eternal 45. I feel like this issue is kind of bringing us back on track. In a way, we've kind of brought back the mystical angle that we've been dealing with for the last little bit. But in doing so, we kind of wrapped up a corner of it, kind of brought Batwing and Corgan back into the fold. And then you bring in the ladies, and then it all just kind of starts to coalesce and everybody's coming together again, even though the stories aren't really connected. The characters are finally meeting up because their little threads are somewhat... They're, like, the knot's tied around, you just need to pull it. So things are coming together. Now that we're here, though, it feels like this book really has wandered further than I think I realized for a long time, going week to week. Because, geez, we're 45 weeks in now. That is a long time. And I'm curious to see how this goes. I'm really hoping things kind of more or less wrap up soon, because at this point it feels like the book that we started with all the crazy, Jim Gordon stuff, to what was happening with Alfred's niece, to the mystical, to the weird cyber bot thing that went totally awry. And just dealing with all these characters got so blown out of proportion that now that we're kind of coming together, it feels like so many things have happened. We're not on the same story at all. So, oh well. But there you go. On the flip side, Future's End is starting to come together and really feels like a freaking tied together comic. We have Brainiac Galactus on the hunt, and in it we get a lot coming through. The only part that kind of peeves me is all of a sudden Batman wasn't just there, because there's a lot of stuff kind of floating around Batman. Batman's just a player in this comic now, which is kind of half the reason I was enjoying this book, was because he wasn't there. Also, Superman comes around again, even though he wasn't there. Now we're just missing Wonder Woman, and this will have been the Trinity book that Trinity wanted to be. A world without the three of them. So, I do, however, like a lot of the ties together, but there's one part that's really worrying me, and that is with Mr. Terrific. Because if they turn around and have Batman be good guy, and then the black guy turns around to be the one to be bad guy, that would just be miserable. Not that every comic has to be so socially aware, but they don't even need a twist like that for conflict or anything. It would just be pointless, and it would just be really unaware and just bad on every level. So that's the only thing worrying me about this comic right now. But this has turned out to be the best weekly comic that you could hope for. So, if you haven't been checking it out, you just have to go buy 40-some comics and catch up to it. Sweet. The Harley Quinn Valentine special moved. What was kind of cool is this felt like what would be like a 3-issue arc anymore, just all in one thing. So, kind of, cool, complete story. Just kind of a fun throwaway, but that's all this should be, right? So, if you're looking for a little more fun, there you go. Shutter 9 is really interesting because it takes the most, kind of out there comic that we have and it grounds it a little, which is probably a little overdue, but we're here and it's great. In this issue, Owen Giannini, the colorist, really pops. This really feels like the colorist's issue. Couldn't say too much more without completely digging in, but this book continues to be one of the strongest offerings Image is putting out. You have to appreciate the creativity going into here. This is more of what comics should be. I mean, you don't want everything to be all the same ever, but nothing's going to be exactly like this. If we could get more in this vein, I think we'd all be happier. Rachel Rising 31, really powerful, kind of bizarre send back from where we were, but I have to admit, we're 31 issues in now, and I'm starting to get to that point where I kind of remember things, but some things are getting a little hazy in the background, especially because this book isn't always the most consistent, which is fine. I just, as opposed to, say, Batman Eternal, which comes out every week and is already 40 issues in after almost a year, we're years into this, and we're not as far, and it's just time to maybe recapture some of that. So, good stuff. But yeah, Rachel Rising is just one of those ones you should. It's Terry Moore. He's one of the people in comics who you just should be following. Ghosted 17. Is anyone still reading Ghosted? I'd kind of like to know. I've been enjoying this book, but I feel like this is the start of a new arc where it feels like everything's culminated to this. And I want to finish this chunk, but after that, unless there's some hook or they do something to make me interested in another character, or something new has to be injected for me to want to continue with this. Because as much as I've been enjoying it, and they really upped the ante for this arc, and that's fine. But beyond that, it needs something else to kind of stand out. This book has been kind of blending for me with some of the other supernaturally stuff. And so I feel like it's had a good run, but I either want this book to inject something new or just finish strong and then have a spiritual successor or something, which would fit. So, yeah, my final days of Ghosted might be coming here soon. 5 Ghosts 15. Interesting, but right when the book was starting to get interesting, we're at a cliffhanger. I was really able to flip through this, and I think it's really well explained by the little outro paragraph we have here, because it ends with, as I said, a cliffhanger. So it's, how's that for a cliffhanger? One of the great joys of working on this book is the ability of the art team to tell an effective story without the need for dialogue. Chris and Lauren really went above and beyond here, and we all hope you enjoyed the climatic battle you just read. I disagree somewhat. I feel the art team did a decent job, and they do convey some stuff, and it wasn't just a fight. Like, there was more there, sure, but the beauty of comics, and it might feel stilted at times. There's times where it works without it. Zero's the best example. This is not Zero in that. You need to have some build and some more tension for the fight to be there, and these characters are so underdeveloped because they kind of rely on these silent battles to fill so much of the comic that the context at times is lacking, and this is severely lacking some context, which makes these drawn out page after page brawls feel like filler after a while rather than content. So whereas this is exciting and fun, this is a comic that did better when it started, because I think they feel they found their voice here, and I feel it did better when they were trying to contain the fights in a certain way that had that motion but with less pages, and then they kind of like put in the story, so you had this really good pacing, and now our pacing's just unfurled, and so that to the point where I feel like if 2 of these fights were to happen in a 5-issue chunk of the way the stories seem to rotate, you could really probably boil it down another issue to 4, and not really lose anything except for a few frames of brawling. So, and there's a lot to these fights that, like this page, it's 5 frames. We really could have taken those frames, put them down, and had there's a break here with the action, but you could have done that, because they do a similar thing again after another page, and it just, it can be condensed down so that the pages can be used better. Sorry if I'm just flashing pages and it's hard to see. Yeah. I just didn't feel like I read much of anything, basically. So that's it for this week of Wednesday's Serial. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you soon with another comic review.